6:43 in Trinidad and Tobago. Well, we are joined by Government Minister Symon de Nobriga, Minister of Communications, on this World Television Day. And it was only when I was reading the introduction and rehearsals that I realized that today was World Television Day. It was meant to mark the first World Television Forum, which was held in 1996. I wonder why it took so long, because TV was with us since the probably late 1940s, early 1950s, around that time. But I suppose that global forum held by the United Nations was felt to be important at that time. And the impact of television in the media landscape cannot be underscored. Well, indeed right now, because everybody's looking to watch the World Cup. And it just tells us about the impact of television itself as a medium. So many years ago, you would have had to listen to a crackling radio to get some coverage of something. Now it's wall-to-wall coverage of almost everything. So that's why we have the minister with us, with his Liverpool scarf behind him. I don't know who he's supporting, but Liverpool ain't playing in the World Cup. Minister, good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Fazeer. Morning, Fazeer. Always back in Liverpool and Trinidadian by birth, Brazilian by football.
I'm surprised you're actually back in Brazil still, because they left out Roberto Firmino, who is of course a Liverpool player. So, but still, your loyalties are acknowledged in that regard.
Correct.
But tell us about let's put it in context. World Television Day. What does that really mean from your perspective?
So, Fazeer, listen, your lead in there was pretty much as best as it could be put. I think what World Television Day is meant to signify is the importance of television, not just the physical nature of television itself, but also the impact that it has had as a communal tool, the impact it has had in driving our personal thoughts, desires, wants, bringing information to us, sharing our own lives, our own experiences with others. And I think that is really what the gist of World Television Day is about, the importance that this medium has been for generations.
And it's one that's basically dominated our lives in many ways, and it can be used for both a positive and a negative. What is your perspective on that? Because again, depending on which world news feed you're watching, whether it's Al Jazeera, whether it's BBC, whether it's CNN, you sometimes wonder if they are all talking about the same issue. So the issue of balance as against propaganda always comes into the discussion when we're talking about television.
Well, you know, Fazeer, as a government minister, I might be able to find local examples of that as well. But the thing is that like any tool, it can be used for quote unquote good and bad. And I think that is what we have seen exacerbated, particularly over the last, I would say, definitely last 10 years, but in particular over the last five years, is that sort of segregation of content. Whereas I'm sure you and I would have both come up in a time where content was really disseminated in a general form. So what is the general consensus of this, good or bad, pros and cons? Now what we are seeing is television really being, or content being designed for television and all the other mediums that have the concept of television. We're seeing podcasts and all these things which are really born out of the concept of television. But we are seeing that being designed really for niche markets. So I'm going to speak to this population, this group of people. So it's interesting times, and I think it drives everyone, all the stakeholders in media, in television, both the media houses and the entities that utilize it as a route to get information out. It really is interesting times for us, because we all have to figure out where the space is that we have to operate in. How do we speak to all the different populations that utilize television in many different ways?
Absolutely, and that brings to question the relevance of television, because I know a lot of young people who say they don't watch television anymore, that they get it from a podcast, they get it from of Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So the information, as you said correctly, could be targeted in a particular direction, and therefore the question is often asked about the relevance and the value of television in the modern environment.
It is, as I said, it is a space now where we are all having to reevaluate television. At one point, television and radio, newspapers were seen as sort of the be-all and end-all. You were the start, the middle, and the end of the supply chain. Now, what we find is that all media houses and the people who have to utilize those media houses have to see television as just a component of it, whether that is where the information starts and it then gets disseminated in other places, or the reverse. It depends on the model. But I will tell you, I was in a conversation on Friday, and the point was made to me that television still has a role in bringing communities together. And you made the point about World Cup. You know, right now we are going to be seeing every day for World Cup people sitting around screens, whether those screens are at a friend's home, whether it be in a bar, whether it be in a restaurant, whether it be in some sort of a fan zone area, even outside of this country, around the world, sharing this experience together. It is the one thing that television can do that screens can't. You know, my children who are 16 and 12 live on their phones, but that puts you here. Whereas when we gather around, almost like how we used to gather around, I suppose, in earlier times, around a fireside, it is this sort of sharing of a communal nature. And I think that television still has a major role to play, in particular in bringing families and communities together.
And you referenced it earlier when we were having the discussion. You said you could find local references to the issue of balance and so on. As a government minister, you are front and center there because, for example, TTT is about government propaganda. You will disagree, of course, but again, on the other side, TV6 will be seen as anti-government or CNC3 or whatever. But in a small space like this, do you think that there should be a real pursuit of independence in a government-owned or run media institution?
So I don't know that I would ascribe propaganda to it. I think that all media houses utilizing television have a basic bottom line, right? And I think that state media has a role to play in doing the things that other media houses simply may not be able to do, because it does not feed the bottom line. Whereas TV6, the network of CNC3, Synergy, or any of the major 16 television stations in this country, very often as a business, while you may have a qualitative desire and a qualitative bottom line, you also have a quantitative one. And very often you can see the business of government and what government is doing as not necessarily adding to that. Yeah. And I think that state media has to do that. State media has a role to play there in order to find balance across the nation, whether that is propaganda or whether that is being seen as sharing information. I suppose tomatoes, I don't see it that way, obviously. And I've never seen it that way. And I think that state media has a role to play for government, not a party, but for government. At the end of the day, however, you do see, and I mean, Fazeer, in your case, I mean, you have a very distinct style of hosting, a distinct style of interviewing. I don't necessarily see that as anti-government. Sometimes I may think you take an anti-government position. But I think that in general, you are pressing, and you are pressing to get answers. And that is the role. That is the role of the medium by itself, in order to bring clarity, to bring information to others. I mean, if that means an uncomfortable conversation, then it means an uncomfortable conversation. But we are also utilizing television to drive us to a more mature society. And you only become that through uncomfortable conversations.
And you know, that conversation is an interesting one in the time that we have available, Minister, because the argument is that really television, because of big business, because of multi-billion-dollar interests, are actually driving you in a particular direction. So you don't analyze or spend time thinking about different points. You turn on the channel, or you go to the website, or you watch the TV station that aligns with your views. Hence Fox News in the US and so on. So the concern is, again, the role of television, because in the same way you talked about your children watching that little iPhone screen, the screen might be bigger, it might be 52 inches, it might be 72 inches, it might take up your whole wall, but you're still only watching what you like.
And I think that is where there is if I want to bring it back a little bit to the importance of television as a tool, but also the people who utilize it. And this is now also a cry to all the media houses to start reimagining our local content. Start reimagining content that speaks to a national perspective, to start creating spaces where, whether that be through information, entertainment, infotainment, that we constantly think about the importance of the tool that we are utilizing, and not just the bottom line of the individual show, the sponsorship, the advertising, because television is going to continue to play an integral role in building up this nation. So we drive local content, we drive content that allows our young people to see excellence that looks and sounds like them. And I think that if we do that, if we see that through the lens of where we want to be in terms of a best case future scenario for this country, I think that television is going to be a major tool and an integral part of that growth.
And just a final point on that whole issue of balance. If as in the private sector, you're driven by the bottom line, and those who could boost your bottom line say, we want you to show 2 ants eating a leaf for the next hour, and we paying for the time, what do?
Those are decisions that have to be made. I think that if you want to change the conversations in boardrooms, whether those boardrooms be in the media houses or in the advertising entities, you have to change the conversation on the ground. And I think the faster that we start understanding that where we are now is part of the growth of any nation, that we have gone through this phase, I suppose, almost like when you have teenagers and they see themselves as the most important thing, and everything is that me. I think that is, we are getting past that now, and now we have to start thinking about, okay, we are becoming adults now as a nation. 60 years sounds like a lot, but as a country, it is really, we are young in the game. But we now have to start saying, what do we want as a country? What do we want to see on television? Freetown Collective said it best. I want to see me on my TV. So how do we allow people to see themselves, and not just who they are now, but who they want to be? And I think that is where television has to come into play. And you and me and Jason Williams and Kimberly D'Souza and all the other players who are part of this, all the other stations, this year have found balance there.
Yeah, that's it. I was going to jump in right here. I don't appreciate you mentioning the competition here on TV6.
I thought with you and me.
But thanks very much.
We all have a role to play. We all have a role to play to create that, and using television to get our message out and to help form this nation, to find the best possible future state.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for taking the time to be with us this morning.
Thanks a lot for having me on, Fazeer. Happy World Television Day to you and to the station.